Hey robot makers, hope you're having a good day so far. So do you want to learn how to communicate between two Raspberry Pi Picos or any other MicroPython device that has Bluetooth with Bluetooth so they can communicate backwards and forwards in two directions? Then this is the show for you. So let's dive straight in. My name's Kevin. Come with me as we build robots, bring them to life with code and have a whole load of fun along the way. Okay, let's get over to our keynote and make a start. So this one had me baffled for an entire day. I thought, oh, there'd be a nice easy one this. I've done projects before that use Bluetooth. How hard could this be? And yeah, it took quite a bit of effort. So I think this is worthy of a show and a bit of a deep dive. So what we're going to do today is we've got two Raspberry Pi Pico Ws. These are the ones with the silver kind of button there, the silver kind of shield area. That's the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip just under there. And we're going to send and receive data between two MicroPython boards. Initially seems a bit complex to do, but once you get your head around how this works, it is quite straightforward. It's surprisingly simple. I actually think it comes down to like one parameter why this didn't work and why it now works. But you can play along with this as well. The code, if you are interested, is just that way there. So kezrobots.com/blog/2-way-bluetooth.html, and all the resources and everything that you need is there, as well as a complete write-up of how that code works. So what you'll need is obviously two Raspberry Pi Pico Ws. If you've got, in theory, this should work between any Bluetooth MicroPython devices. I've not tested that, but it should do because it's just the protocol that's being used, not actually the boards. And yeah, like I said, it should work between any two boards that use Bluetooth. So on that screen there, I've got the on the left is the Pico W, the original one without the header pins, and on the right is the Pico WH, that's the with headers. You can see that it hasn't got the castellations, it's got the really nice, neat solder joints, and it also has that debug connector on there as well. So whichever you have to hand, they're quite affordable nowadays. So a quick reminder of Bluetooth. So this is a wireless communications technology for exchanging data over short distances. It works over a couple of meters. You might be able to get it as far as maybe 10-20 meters at a push, but yeah, it says typically covers up to 100 meters. I'm not sure that's completely true. It certainly works best, and you get the high data rates as close as they can be. So yeah, developed by Ericsson in 1989, intended to replace RS-232 and data cables to wirelessly communicate between devices. It kind of came along at the same kind of time that digital mobile phones were becoming more popular. It operates on the 2.4 to 2.485 gigahertz ISM band, similar to Wi-Fi kind of frequencies, and ideal for personal area networks, devices like smartphones, PCs, peripherals, and robots, of course. And there you go, the symbol, if you don't know already, is made up of the Nordic symbol H, the Nordic symbol B, sort of mashed together. You get that Bluetooth logo. And Harald Bluetooth was the king of Denmark in the sort of 9th century, 10th, I never know how you do centuries, 10th century? So this works on a client-server pattern. This, I think, is the root of why it can be quite confusing as to why it can be just confusing to understand how this actually works. So one of the devices will be a server, and one will be the client. So the client is the one that sort of requests information, and the server one is the one that provides that information. So in the case of a remote control and a robot, which is what I built, I'm not sure where I put it now, one of the PCBs that I made a while ago. I should be returning to this very shortly. So there's the one I made for remotely controlling a Pico-based robot. So in this case, the client is the handset and the server is the robot. So the server is going to be the one receiving the information from the handset, the commands, and then doing something with it. So the client is in control. The client can ask the server for data. The peripheral can send that data back. So the peripheral, in our case, is the robot. So the server responds back with data to the client. So client-server pattern. So let's have a look how this will work then. So our server is the peripheral, the client is the central, that's the terminology that's used in all the Bluetooth documentation, and the client, the central, will request data from the server, the peripheral will send that data back. So we just have to have one Pico in the central role and one Pico in the peripheral role. And this bit where we can send data back after being sending back data back to the server, that seems to be a bit of an afterthought. It doesn't seem to be quite part of that client-server model. I think the reason for this is a lot of the Bluetooth devices, the low-energy ones certainly, are things like, weighing scales. That doesn't need to send any data. It doesn't have to receive any data. It just sends data out to a smartphone app, for example. And similar with the remote control, you don't really need to get data back to the remote control. You just need to send out a command to say move forward, move backwards, and so on. So one acts as the central, the client, the other acts as the peripheral, and the central device can send messages to the peripheral, and the peripheral can send responses back. And that's what we're going to be looking at, how to do that today. So the stages of how Bluetooth connectivity works, this is quite straightforward to get working. It's covered really nicely as well in the official Raspberry Pi book, which is the MicroPython on Raspberry Pi Pico. And towards the back of the book, they've got a whole section on Bluetooth, chapter 12 in fact. So the way that this works, the server will advertise that it has some services and it has some characteristics that make up that service. So it'll advertise, and the client will scan, it'll look for all available devices, and it'll probably be looking for them with a particular service name, such as KES robots, and then with a particular characteristic set as well. So you want both of those things. They can then establish a connection. Once they have that connection, they can then do some data transfer. You can do that right away, or you can wait for some event to happen. It's completely entirely up to you and your program. And then at some point, they'll both disconnect. Now, this might happen asynchronously. All these communications happen asynchronously. And what I mean by that is they can happen anytime, and our code has to handle that. So we will use an entirely special library of code with MicroPython, which is the asynchronous library. So you'll see that code mentioned quite a bit, async and await, in our code. So how we classify the data, then I was talking about, just move that over there. So I was talking about the services. So the services have characteristics, and we can have multiple services that we advertise from our Bluetooth low energy device. So the services and characteristics are kind of a hierarchical thing. Characteristics belong to a service, which belongs to a device. And that just means that we can build out more characteristics if we wanted to. So we could create a completely custom PCB, for example, that's got like a temperature sensor on there, pressure sensor, humidity sensor. We could send all those different readings back on different characteristics if we wish. And it's just a different way of handling all that data and separating it out. So these Bluetooth services and characteristics are identified by a universally unique ID, UUID. So you'll see that in the code quite a bit. And some of these UUIDs are standard based. So if you want to have a device that sends out temperature readings, for example, there's an environmental temperature UUID that you can use for that characteristic, and that just helps other devices that don't know anything about your code. They just see the service and the characteristics being advertised, and they can connect to them and then consume them. So that's something that we can do there. So yeah, we're just saying that about universally unique IDs. We'll see that in our code. Some of these are completely made up. We can make up our own. Other ones are ones which are defined by this Bluetooth Special Interest Group for Bluetooth SIG. So just be aware of that when you're using these numbers. Usually just use the same ones and it's fine. If it's for something such as just your own internal project, it doesn't really have to be standards compliant really. Okay. So code layout. So the way that I've designed this code, I thought rather than having two completely separate programs, I'll write one program that can work on either Pico, and we can just change one constant, and it can define what the role of that Pico is, whether it's the peripheral or whether it's the central mode. So that's how I've designed it. So all of this code is going to run in a loop, which is part of this asynchronous code, the async loop. And then the code kind of splits into two parts. You'll see there's a peripheral code, there is a central code, and then there is a send data and a receive data function. There's a run peripheral code and a run central code, and that's where the kind of codes diverse a little bit. On top of that, there's a general function for encoding and decoding. This is just a way of making sure our code kind of works in a nice friendly way when we're sending strings of text or whatever it is between the two devices. And then scanning the Bluetooth low energy, that is a function that we can share across all the different codes, even though it's really just going to be the client that's going to be scanning. The server will be the one that will be advertising its services. And the Bluetooth configuration, that's just a bunch of settings that we'll have in our code, which they will both share. There's just that name, Pico A or Pico B, just have a different role within each of those. Okay, so that is how the code is going to be laid out. And some things to note. So this piece of code, I think, is the crux of getting the two-way communication to work. So there's a write equals true parameter when you're creating the Bluetooth service. So BLE service equals the synchronous IO Bluetooth low energy, which IOBL I pronounce it as, dot service, and then the service unique universally unique identifier, and then we have a characteristic which uses that characteristic class, and then we have the service, the unique ID for the Bluetooth characteristic, and then we set read, notify, write, and capture all to true. I think by default you might see read and notify on there, but the write and capture I think may be separate ones. I think the capture is actually for something else, but I've just enabled that as well. And then we just register those services with the register services function in the IOBL class. So yes, I spent literally all of Saturday trying to get this to work, and I tried all kinds of combinations. I almost gave up on this, but I persevered because I wanted to know why this wasn't working. Okay, so if you like what I do and you want me to make more of these kinds of videos, obviously ones that don't crash midway through the stream, then give me a thumbs up. Drop me a comment as well, and if you've not subscribed to the channel already, please consider subscribing. It means an awful lot to me. I love seeing those subscriber numbers goes up, even though it's just a pure vanity metric. And I do go live every single Sunday even, every Sunday at 7 o'clock GMT or British Summer Time. We're currently in British Summer Time, but I think not for much longer, and then we'll switch back, fall back an hour. Okay, let's dive into the code, shall we? So what I'll do, I'll just go to me over here now. And let's see, I'm just going to go over here, make sure that's finished there. Yes, it has. And let's go over to Thonny. So what I've actually got over here, I've got two, let me find it on here, two Raspberry Pis, Picos. One of them is connected to another Raspberry Pi. So if I go over here, so this is a Raspberry Pi, my RPI 400, which I just have just out of sight up here. And this one, if I just stop that there to get it to reconnect, you can see that it's got loads of code. In fact, it's not the Raspberry Pi 400 I want. That was running another piece of code, another project. It's my 2 gig version. This is the Raspberry Pi 2 gig version, Raspberry Pi 5. So this one is ready to run some code. So I've got Pico A and Pico B code, and we'll look through this in depth in a minute, but I can run on here the Pico B, so this is going to be running the peripheral code, and on the other one that's going to be running the central code. Okay, so let's go over to my computer, which is running Thonny. So let me just switch over to that. There we go. So I've got both code on here, and again, you can grab this code if you want from GitHub. I'll put the link up on the other stream. I'll put that one up at the end of the channel. I'll also have it in the description as well. Right, so let's have a look and see what's going on with this code, shall we? I'm going to scroll down, scroll to the very top. We'll have a look what we're importing here. So we need to import this synchronous IO library for Bluetooth low energy, the AIOBLE. We're going to import Bluetooth, which is the Bluetooth module for MicroPython. We're going to import the asynchronous IO library. This is so that we can do things in a synchronous loop and respond to external things coming in from the network, from the Bluetooth radio, and we can react to them in kind of real time. We're going to import this struct. You might not have seen that before. This is very much a kind of C language structure, and it's a way of structuring code or data, I should say, in your code, and packing and unpacking that into a byte array. So we'll be doing that when we send our data, receive our data, we'll pack and unpack it. Okay, so then we have the sys import exit. I just wanted some way of exiting the code, kind of absolutely exiting the code, and I thought that's probably the easiest way to do this. This is just if you don't provide either the peripheral or central in this I am, and it's just like, it doesn't mean anything else other than I am the peripheral or I am the central, and that's where we define what role we have. So these two universally unique IDs, there's one for the Bluetooth service and one for the characteristic, because we've only got one characteristic in this just to transfer some data. I think they're actually like environmental sensors or something. But you can use these ones, they're kind of safe, and they both need to have the same set of service and characteristics so that they can kind of, it's almost like a channel that they're communicating on. So this is just a bit of safety code here. It says if I am is not in peripheral or central, print I must either be central or peripheral. So if you don't have that set there, it'll just quit at that point. So that's what that's for. If it's the central, then we can say I am sending to peripheral. If we are the peripheral, then we can say I am sending to the central. I'm not sure I actually use that in the rest of the code. That's probably a bit of debugging. But we have this message here that we can send, and it looks a bit complicated, this, but honestly it's not too difficult really. So an F string is just a way of putting variables inside a string and have the value of the variable get replaced. So that's all that F does in front of that string there. So hello from, and then depending whether we are central or peripheral, it'll replace that variable there with central or peripheral. So we can just see when we print out to the console which one is responding and communicating. Okay, so next up we've got a bunch of Bluetooth parameters. I'm not sure all of these are used, but we can talk through what they are. So the first one is the name of the service. So this is simply just going to be the peripheral or the central. Again, that F string just means it'll replace that parameter, that constant with the value. Then we've got the unique, universally unique ID for the service, which is here. Then we have the characteristic universally unique ID. And then we have the appearance. So appearance, advertising interval, scan length, interval and window. These are all to do with the advertising and the scanning part of discovering the services. So you don't have to worry about too much what they are. It's basically just how long, like 5 seconds to scan. The window is 30,000 milliseconds, I think that is. And similar with the window. So you can basically just set them and just forget about them at that point. Well, I think we do use them in our code. I might have just put an absolute value in, so we'll have a look at that in a minute. This state variable, so message count. So this is if you're printing something to the console on Thonny particularly, after a while it might look like there's nothing happening because you can't see that message that's being repeated is actually messaging is repeating because it's scrolling up. So by setting some kind of counter on there, it just gives you an indication that you can see it counting up. So let's go to the next pieces. So encode and decode, they simply just encode or decode the string as a UTF-8, which is just the standard for text. Because when you break this text up and send it across as data, sometimes you can lose, it looks like you get a bit of garbage in there. So by encoding it properly and decoding it just means that we get a valid text string there. Right, so the next couple of blocks of data, this is about send data. So the send data task, what this one will do is it takes a connection and a characteristic and it's going to send some data to the connected device. So this is what our peripheral will do once we've made that connection. It's going to send some data. So this is where we can include anything where we want to send different readings or whatever it is that we want to send there. So we're just bringing in the global means that we want to use that message count that we defined further up, but we want to be able to change the value of that. If we don't put global there, we can read the value, but any changes that we make are just local to this particular function. So by bringing in global, that means that we can definitely change those values and have them stay there. Okay, let's bear with me a second so make sure we're all good. Yes. So next up then, we have got a loop. So this is going to loop infinitely. It's worth also just pointing out here the async in front of the function there, so the send data function. This means that we can call this function at any point and MicroPython will handle this. If we don't put that as an asynchronous one, other code could block this from running. By having it as asynchronous, it will definitely run when we need it to. So the while true is just a loop. It's going to loop forever because true is always going to be true. And we say if not connection, so we're passing in a connection there. So if there isn't a connection, we just need to say there's no connection. Continue means don't go further in this loop, go right back to the top of the while loop and try again. Because it might be that a connection has been established further in another function that we're going to run at the same time. If it's not a characteristic, so if there's no characteristic, if that's none in effect, we can then say no characteristic is provided to send data, and we can then just do that continue. You could do return there, and that would quit the entire function, but because we want this to be running all the time, and when it responds to disconnect and connection events, we want that to be basically just go to the top of this loop here. So by having continue, we can do that. Next up is the message. So we want to get the message that we defined before that just says hello I am peripheral or hello I am central, and then we're just going to add to that the message count. So again, we've got another f string where we can change that, we can insert a variable within these curly braces, and we're having two variables this time. We're having the message itself and then the message count. So the message count, we're going to increment that by 1, so that each time we go through this particular piece of code we get a higher value. It just helps when we're debugging and seeing that our code is working the way we expect it to. And then we're going to print to the console sending and whatever that message is, so the message plus the count. Next up, we've got a couple of things. So try and accept. You'll see these as a pattern. So if something could go wrong, we can catch that error. So the way that we have try and accept is a way of catching errors rather than it just crashing out to the console. So we'll say try message equals encode the message. So that's just going to convert it to a byte string for it to be sent. We're then going to write that characteristic. So we're going to write that message to the characteristic that we've passed into this function. We're then going to wait for half a second, and this await async sleep. We're not using the sleep function because that would block all the code from working, and we don't want that to happen. We want MicroPython to be able to sort of move things in and out as it requires, as it needs to, because this is an asynchronous function. So asynchronous functions use this await function, and that synchronous io.sleep is a sleep function that doesn't block all the code from running. Next, we have the response. This is how we can see if there's data coming back from the server. So we can say decode message characteristic.read. So if we didn't set that read and write properties on our service before, we would only be able to do, for example, a write or just the read, for example. So then we print out to the console the string I am, so the peripheral sent or central sent a message, and that it got a response back, so that response that came back. So we'll be able to see what we sent and see what the response back from that server is. Now, if there's any problems doing this, so say that it got disconnected, then we want to handle that exception. So we can simply just say error writing, and then E is whatever that exception is. So it won't crash our code, we just capture it and we can just write it out to our console. And then it's best at that point to continue to exit the loop and go back to beginning, because we just want to go through again and try again. And then if everything goes well, we can then just wait for half a second, and it's just a way of, if we didn't do that, we'd get loads of print statements happening very, very quickly, and print statements to the console actually take time to do, so that can actually artificially slow your code down. So just bear that in mind when you have print statements. So that was sending data. So receiving data. So to do this, we're going to bring in that message count again, because we want to be able to change that, update that as we go. And we say while true, so again this is an infinite loop, it'll carry on forever. We say we are going to try this block of code, and we've got 2 accepts on this one. You can have different exceptions depending on what the error is that you're trying to capture. So this time we say data equals await characteristic.read. So we're going to read in that data. So this is the code that's running on the server. We're going to read in that data. If there is data, so if we say if data, that means if data is true, if there is values that we are looking for rather than just being empty or none. And then we can say print the peripheral or the central received, and then we can decode that message, whatever the data is that we've just read in there. And we can also just put on there the message count just to show that that's increasing as well. And then we can write back after we've read it. We can say got it. So after we've read the data, we can write back to the server and say we got the data. So this is two-way communication. We're reading data and we're also writing it back. And then we can do await async sleep. Again, we just sleep for half a second, and then we'll increment the message count. Now, if there's 2 types of error that we can catch here, the first one is any kind of asynchronous I/O timeout error messages. So if we were trying to send a message, we wait for a period of time. That period of time is what we defined further up in that block of variables. And if we have a timeout error message, we can basically capture that and just say timed out waiting for data in the name of the service, which is BLE name. Okay. So Kieran's asking a question there about why do the sleeps? Why not? Why does the read and write not block asynchronously on the socket equivalent? So these are just a way of pausing the code so you can actually see it go up on the screen. Otherwise, it'll just be flying off the screen. So it's not needed for this response. It's just so we can see when we're printing things out. It really should be quite close to that, really. So next up then is the other exception, which is a catch-all. So except E. So any other kind of exceptions that happen, we can capture those, and we can handle them there. And again, we're just going to break out of this particular loop if any of these things happen. Then the next block of code that we have is the run peripheral mode. So there's run peripheral and run central mode. These are the two different kind of roles that the Bluetooth devices have. So the peripheral one, so we're going to set up the service. We just do aiobl.service, and then that universally unique ID that we define further up. We then define what the characteristic is by just using the aiobl characteristic class, and then we pass in the service that we've just defined. We pass in that characteristic universally unique ID, and then we set these 4 different parameters to true. So if we want to be able to read and write on this connection, then this is where we need to make sure we've got read and write. And I think I wasted an entire Saturday because I didn't have write to true, because as I was trying to write data, it was just ignoring it. So quite frustrating, that. And then capture, I think, is you can actually capture what you've sent and just read it as well. That's what that's for, I think. Then we register the service, so that's now going to be registered with the aiobl code. Then we can just print out that the service that we've just defined there, the name of the service, starting to advertise. Then the main loop for this, we will say async with await aiobl advertise. So it's basically going to sort of start broadcasting that it has these services available with these characteristics. We pass in the name, we pass in the service ID, we pass in the appearance, and that is going to be called connection. So that whole thing, we can just refer to that as connection, and that's what we actually pass to our send data later on that we use. Now, if we have more than one task, we can actually define these in a list of tasks. So this little dictionary of or list of tasks. So we can say async.create task, and it's going to basically get that function that we defined further up, and it's going to run that task. And the way that we gather them together, we say await async IO gather and then start tasks. We don't know how many tasks they're going to be. It's however many are inside this particular list here. And it's then going to run them. It's then going to have them ready to run. If that task stops, then we can then say I am disconnected, and we can break. We can stop the code. It'll come out of the while true loop, and it'll basically just exit that run peripheral mode. Now luckily we have further down, we have another task that will fire them back up if they stop. This next bit of code then is for scanning. So this is how we can scan for Bluetooth devices. So we can say print scanning for Bluetooth low energy beacon named, and again we're looking for a particularly named Bluetooth. If you don't do that, you can just do a general scan and see all the Bluetooth devices in your area, all your mobile phone connections, your neighbours' mobile phone devices, anything that sends Bluetooth data out there. So if they've got like a fancy fridge next door to you that broadcasts whatever temperature is your fridge, you can see that as well. You might not be able to connect to it, but you'll be able to see it. Then we've got async with aiobl scan. So this is the actual scan taking place. These values here are the ones we define further up as constants, and I think really that 5000 should be just the name of that constant if we're being good with our code, but this is just code that works. So the interval and the window and the active true there, what we set, and then we will get a bunch of results back. So if we scan our local area, we can get a whole load of different devices that it's detected, and they appear in the scanner, which is a list of results. So what we want to do is we want to find one which has the unique identifier for our Bluetooth service. So if result.name equals I am sending to, so remember before when we defined that little constant, and the Bluetooth service is in the results.services, so it is one that we're looking for. These are the droids we're looking for. Then we can say print found the result name, so found peripheral, found server. with the service ID and then whatever the service IDs that we found, and then we can return that result. We're essentially returning that device to our the code that calls this Bluetooth scan. So how do we use that Bluetooth scan? Well, in the central code, which we've got here, so this is another asynchronous block of code, we will start an infinite loop, so while true, device equals await BLE scan, so that will return back the one that it's found. If it doesn't find it, it won't get past that piece of code. So if device is none, we can say continue, that essentially just exits out this loop and then goes exits out of this run of the loop and then goes back to the top of the true function. We can print out the device name. So this is the device that we found, the name is whatever the device name is. We've got this in a try except block here, so we can say connection equals await device.device.connect. Now that looks a bit funky to me. What we should be able to do here is do return result.device, but it doesn't seem to work properly, so I spent a couple of hours on that one. I decided down here I'll just do device.device, and that works. Not sure what's going on there. I know this code now works. If we get a timeout error, it can't find anything because maybe we haven't got other Pico plugged in and switched on and broadcasting, then we can just say timed out during connection. We can run that continue, which takes us back to the top of that true loop there. If we have got past all those different guard clauses there, we can then say print I am connected to connection, and with that connection we can then do some things. So we can say service equals await connection service, so we're now plugged into that service. We can say characteristic equals await service characteristic and that particular characteristic that we're looking for, and that then means we've got something that we can then connect to and read data from. A couple of errors that we just need to check for there. So do we get that timeout error again? We always have to catch those because you can get these things happening. It is common and it's good to handle them. And there's also that just general exception if something goes wrong. We can capture that. We can then say await connection.disconnect, and then we can just say continue, which takes us back to the top of that true loop. Now if everything works okay at that point, we've got a connection, we've found our service, we are connected to it, we can pass that connection and characteristic to a task. So we're going to create a new task that's async.io create task. We're going to say start up the receive data task and pass in that characteristic so that that function can use that characteristic that we've discovered. And then we can do that async gather task, which is just going to run that one. We can have many tasks in there if we want to. If we wanted to have the Bluetooth scanning working all the time, we could do that, for example, but I think it only makes sense to do that piece of code when you need it to. We have a whole bunch of different tasks if you wanted to in there. After that function has stopped running, it will drop down to this this next line here, connection.disconnected. So it'll just disconnect from the other Bluetooth connection, and it'll say BLE name, so peripheral or central, disconnected from peripheral or central, whatever the one that we were connected from is. Whew. Right, and then we've got the main function, so the asynchronous main function. This just runs forever, so while true, if the central role is defined, then we're going to run it in central mode. Otherwise, if it's in the peripheral, we'll run it in peripheral mode. And again, we can just do that gather tasks and have that kick off. And then finally, we have that sync.run main in brackets, which will run this main code asynchronously. So that is our code, and it's the same whether we're looking at Pico A or Pico B. So if I scroll to the very top, the only difference is I am central is on A and I am peripheral on B, and that kind of switches which role. Now, one of the things I was looking at online, because you're kind of breaking the pattern if you're trying to do two-way communication. I think Bluetooth in this particular pattern is designed that you have a client server, one will just request data and one will send it, and that's it. They don't do this sort of backwards and forwards. You could, if you wanted to, have some kind of clever switching thing where they switch roles. So they could switch roles every couple of seconds and check if there's data. You could do it that way, but you can also just do it the way I've just shown you, where you can actually write responses back. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to the other Raspberry Pi. I'm going to start that one up. That's running the Pico B, so that's running the peripheral starting to advertise. Now if I go over to our Pico, which is just on the desk over here, and I then run this in Pico A, you'll start to see, so it's scanning for BLE beacons. It's found one that's called Peripheral. and it says it's getting a message back saying hello from Peripheral with a count of 1. It's also got this got it, so that's the message coming back. So there's two-way communication. We've got a message coming back, and we're sending the message that's hello from Peripheral. So we're sending the got it message back to the Peripheral. Peripheral is sending the hello from Peripheral. And if we switch over to the Raspberry Pi that's running the other one, you can see there that it says Peripheral. Maybe I'll stop this so we can actually see the code. So if I just scroll that up there. So you can see there it says Peripheral sent hello from Peripheral and message count 31, and it got a response back. So that's the two-way communication working. The response that it got back was got it. And you can see that it's going to send Peripheral number 2. It then sent Peripheral 2, 32, and got the hello from Peripheral back. Now that sometimes happens, and I think that's to do with in one of my pieces of code, you're supposed to have the await function, and I took that away because it wasn't doing anything, and then by having this in here it does seem to work. So sometimes it looks like you're getting the same message back, so you'd have to just handle that kind of thing happening, have something like previous message, and if you get the previous message back, just ignore it, for example. But yeah, you can see that the got it message is coming from the server as we're sending it out. So we send it out, we get the response back, got it. So what's interesting, if I now flick back to the Thonny on here, you can see it's gone back to scanning mode. So it got disconnected, it's now scanning. If I go back to the Raspberry Pi, fire up that code again, and then quickly switch over here, you'll see that it's found, it's got the connection. It's really quick to reconnect, and you can see that it's continuing on with its message counting there as well. So it's pretty robust. We can disconnect, connect, and both sides of the code can handle that because of those try except blocks that we have in there. So we have two-way communication working with Bluetooth devices, and yeah, I thought that was quite a complicated thing to get working. The documentation isn't great that's out there. There's a lot of like low-level stuff that you're working with. If you know anything about the ISO model and the ISO stack, we're working quite low level on that one. We're looking at the kind of data level on there, so and some of the physical stuff. So it's pretty low level, and that's why there's quite a lot of detail in there. So if we scroll back up to the section where we set that write, if we have that write enabled, we can do both directions from the Peripheral. So client and server, we are sending data, receiving it back, and we can send a response back to say that we got that response, we got that message. There you go. So that's working in both directions. Phew. So we can have them. You can't see them doing very much on here, but that's both of the Picos. This one is connected to a Raspberry Pi, which is just here. You can see it's the same cable goes around there, and then this one is connected to my Mac, and they're talking to each other, and they can talk quite a way. I'm not sure I would say 100 meters. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration from whoever wrote the spec on that one, but apparently that's what it can do. Cool. Let me know what you think about that. Certainly have a go with the code yourself as well. So if you want to get yourself one of these amazing merch hats, I know Laurie bought one last week, then you can order one from the store. Head over to kesrobots.com/merch to get yourselves one of these. They also do quite nice mugs as well. I know Alex used to drink out of her Kes Robot Maker mug as well. And if you've not joined our Discord group, we are on Discord as well. Come and join the party there. Head over to kesrobots.com/discord to get a free sign-up link. Just check your junk mail if it doesn't come back within about 3 minutes. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm all over social media. So I'm on Threads at KevMcAleer at threads.net. I'm on TikTok at KevMcAleer6. I'm on Instagram at KevMcAleer. I'm on X at KevsMac. I'm on Mastodon at KevsMac at Mastodon Social. It seems to be like the nicest of the bunch, in my opinion. And I'm also on Blue Sky, which is quite quiet at the moment at KevsMac, bsky.social on there as well. So if you definitely want to connect and just say hi, that'd be nice too. Now if you want to join and get your name in the credits, we had quite a few people leave this past month. I'm not sure what the issue is there, but you can certainly do that by going to kesrobots.com/coffee. You don't have to subscribe forever. You can just dip in and out as you see value in the channel. If you want to do a super thanks, you can do that. I think the join button, No, when you subscribe, that gets replaced by the thanks button. You can press that if you want to do like a one-off thanks for that particular video. If you're watching live on the live stream now, if we've managed to sort of stay up without disconnecting for a second time, you can do a super chat and that'll pop up on screen. And if you want to join the YouTube membership program, you can do that as well. Just click the join button after you're subscribed. And there is also a buy me a coffee separate to that as well. You get a few extra bits and pieces there. We have like a buy me a coffee store, and you can get a few discounted things and some things for free on there as well. Cool. Let me just go back over to my slide there. So there's a couple of people I want to give a shout out to. So let me do that now. So Marie, thank you so much for those 2 coffees the last couple of weeks. That was really appreciated. And Toxic Toad got me a coffee as well. And Roland bought 5 coffees. I think that's the most number of coffees I've ever been bought in one go. So thank you very much for that, Roland. Really do appreciate it. Johnny Wilson bought me 3 coffees. Ryan bought 1. Adam bought 1. And Marie, as previous to the other 2, she bought these as well. So thank you again for that, Marie. Really appreciate it. And we've got Shemi. We've got Alvaro. Move that little window that you can't see out the way there so I can see what I'm doing. We've got Maria Louise Mayer, we have Jeff Johnson, Steve Phillips, Dean Corty, Marlene Brent and Tom. That's on the Buy Me a Coffee membership side. And then on the YouTube side over here we have Oxrad39, Littleback, we've got Ford, Paul Cummins, Johnny Bergdahl is that. We have Hans from Cheerlight, Steve Cross, John Paul Jolly, Alistair Ware, Cassie Larkin. We have Larkin. We have Tinkering Rocks, Johnny Bates, Michael, and we of course have Tom, who's our longest subscriber to the channel. Thank you so much. And if you want to get your name in the credits, you can go to kevsrobots.com/credits and join the Robot Overlord army. Cool. So I think that is everything I've got for you. Let's have a quick look. Yes. That's everything on the main show. So over here, YouTube should probably be suggesting a video that you would like to possibly watch next. Definitely click on that and let me know how that goes. It should be something that's interesting to you because the algorithm is pretty clever with that. I think I've got over 380 videos now on the channel, so there's a whole bunch of channel. We've got a super chat from Ford, fantastic. Let's bring that up. Ford says, sorry in advance for the gross food talk in the chat. I'm going to have to go back through the chat in a second and have a look at that. I'll also go back on the other live stream that we had to disconnect. Not sure what's going on with that. I think that was it's possibly Starlink, although it says not on there. We'll have a look at the stats later on. It might be an issue with Restream itself, but I've got both, so it can choose if one disconnects, it can choose our landline instead, which isn't quite as quick. So let me just before we at this point in the video, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time.